Welcome to MCN. £6,999 will buy you a brand new Honda CB750 Hornet. We're here in Spain. We've just ridden it and I thought I'd let you know what it's like. So in a nutshell, it is a very good bike. It's very, very good value. It's the cheapest of all its kind of similar spec middleweight rivals. And the ones that I would say are the best in class at the moment is the Yamaha MT-07 and the Triumph Trident 660. And for your £1 less than £7,000, you get a lot of Hornet for your money. You get a brand new 91 bhp parallel twin engine. You get a full range of electronics, the kind that Honda have only really started recently putting on their bikes. Electronics only really came on this 2017 Fireblade, and this has got very similar electronics. You've got 3 rider modes and a user mode where you can mix and match all the settings. You've got traction control, they call it torque control, which incorporates anti-wheelie. There's engine braking control as well, which you don't really need, but it's there. And for £240 extra, you can have an up and down quick shifter option, which is also 3-way adjustable. So it's got a lot of electronics on it, and they absolutely kind of work together with the engine to make the engine more flexible, which we'll come on to in a minute. You've also got ABS. It's not lean sensitive, but there's ABS there as well. You get upside down forks, although they're not adjustable. They look the part. You get 4-piston Nissan radial brakes, which stop as well as they look, and you get a really nicely made machine. So it's very, very tempting, and there's a lot of good things to say about it and a couple of not so good things to say. So let's start with the looks first of all. When the design sketches came out at the EICMA motorcycle show at the end of 2021, it looked really aggressive. Fantastic, but on its way from there to production, kind of the sharp edges have been rounded off it a little bit, and although it's a well-made bike, it looks quite generic. If you parked the Hornet up in a line of bikes that included GSX-S 750s and Z900s, you'd probably just walk straight past it. So, you know, the looks aren't as striking as they could have been, but it's not the end of the world. The best bit, without doubt, is the engine. So it's not an inline 4 like the old Hornet, but you know, Hornets are all about naked middleweight kicks for very little money, and the old one was definitely that, and the new one is definitely that. The engine is very compact, it's very light. One of the reasons it's like that is because it's got a single overhead cam instead of a double overhead cam, and the fact they just use one cam has got various advantages. The valves can be steeper, the inlet can be steeper, the head can be more compact, and because there's less parts whizzing round in the top of the head creating inertia, the agility is better too. It sounds really nice. It's a 270 degree crank, so it sounds like a V-twin, and just like a Fireblade, which is on the edge of being probably a little bit too loud. The Hornet is the same. It sounds pretty meaty. And nothing like you think a bike like that should sound. So the sound's a big tick, even if it's not a rasping inline 4, it's got its own sound. Parallel twins aren't generally the most exciting sounding engines, are they? But this is pretty good actually. The low end power, it's got really nice soft low end power, so it's easy to ride around town. It's got a big fat mid range. We're riding up in the mountains and you can basically leave it in 3rd gear. Even out of really slow corners, it will just accelerate nicely in 3rd gear. And because the engine is very over square, it's revvy and it's fast too. It makes you realise that 91 bhp is a lot, especially when it's pushing along just 190 kilos. There's a couple of bikes in the class, like the ones I've mentioned, are very slightly lighter, but it feels like a very, very light bike. And incidentally, this engine is going to be used in the new Transalp, exactly as it is in the Hornet. The only differences are the airbox inlets are longer because of the shape of the bike, which will give it a little bit more mid-range, and the back wheel will be bigger, which will make the gearing longer, so it'll feel a little bit longer legged. But apart from that, they're the same. The engine's really nice to use without the traction control on. In third gear coming out of corners, just like an MT-07, you can flick up a wheelie with the traction control off. So it can be a really, really exciting engine. What I don't like about it so much is the throttle response. So picking up a closed throttle through a roundabout, around town, or through a slow corner is quite jerky. So that's kind of the only thing that spoils it. But it's not a massive problem when you get used to it and when the engine's spinning a little bit harder. Going back to the lightness of the bike, not only is it very light, it makes it nice and easy to manage. When you jump on, this is it's a typical Honda. There's nothing to get used to. It's very, very friendly. The seat's low, it's a 795mm seat, but the bike's very narrow, so sort of the standover is quite easy. I'm 6 foot tall. It's hard for me to comment about seat heights because I can get my feet down on most bikes, but I can really get my feet down easily on the Hornet with my legs bent as well. So most people shouldn't have a problem. And because the suspension's quite soft, the whole bike squashes down when you sit on it anyway. So I don't think many people will struggle with the seat height. The pegs are quite rear set, so they never scrape, but they don't squash your knees up. They're quite comfortable. The bar position is nice and natural, and the seat is comfortable. The only complaint I've got about the riding position is that the front to back measurement of the seat isn't very big. So being a tall rider, if I'm just sitting in the middle of the seat, it's fine. As soon as I want to start moving around in the corners, my lower back hits the back seat unit. And when you're going really fast and you really want to move around, that kind of restricts you and you feel a little bit hemmed in. And talking of handling, it is a decent handling bike. So this is the big surprise for me. I wasn't expecting the Hornet to have such sporty geometry as it actually has. So say compared to the CBF 650F, or 650R rather, which is the naked middleweight sister bike, inline 4, that's quite sporty, but this is even sportier. So the wheelbase is shorter, the trail is less, the rake is steeper, and the frame is a lot lighter as well. So when we left this hotel here in Mahaka, where the launch is being based, literally just yards down the road, the bike feels ultra sensitive through the bars. You only have to sniff and you can change direction. And in fact, the first few roundabouts, I ended up thruppenny bitting through the roundabouts because the steering was so sensitive. And then when you add in that kind of jerkiness of the throttle, it didn't feel very nice. It didn't feel very smooth and natural. And you get used to that feeling as you go through the day because your body adapts to the inputs it needs to put into the steering. But it never really feels completely planted. And that's nothing to do with the fact it's built down to a price. It's just the way it's been designed. So for example, an MT-07, the suspension is renowned as being a little bit bouncy, but the bike is balanced and you kind of know where you are with it, and it's easy to ride and you feel like you've got a lot of grip and confidence. It's the same story with the Trident 660. That hasn't got adjustable suspension and it doesn't need it. That is just set to perfection. With the Hornet, you never really feel, it feels like it's on its tiptoes all the time. I never really feel like it's really dug in to the tarmac. And during the first few miles of our ride where it's quite cold, it felt a little bit sketchy to me. But as the day wore on and the tyres are warm and the roads are warm, it wasn't really a problem. And I don't really think it's going to be a problem for the kind of person that buys it. I'm probably just being a little bit picky, but when the Yamaha and the Triumph is so good, then you can afford to be a little bit picky. The tyre grip is really good. We rode the bike on Michelin Road 5s. It also is going to come on Dunlop Road Sport 2s. So they're sports touring tyres. There was lots of grip, really lots of confidence. And it rides pretty well as well. The suspension is a little bit crashy. So over bumps it's quite harsh sometimes. Generally it's okay. And the suspension is a little bit underdamped. So there's not a lot of damping in the forks. So there's a lot of front to back movement when you're on and off the throttle. And when you're in corners, it takes a little while to settle. But again, this isn't a Street Fighter. It's a budget middleweight naked, so you can kind of forgive it all of those things. At the end of the day, it's very easy to ride and very engaging. What else can I tell you about this bike? Well, the brakes are very good. I'm really impressed with the brakes. The biking's gone through a period where the ABS has robbed all the feel out of the braking systems, but this has got pretty good feel, pretty good power at the front, and I use loads and loads of back brakes, so the back brake's really good as well. So compared to its rivals, I'd say an MT-07 is more fun because it's got a bit of a perkier engine. Hasn't got any electronics, but it doesn't really need them. The electronics on this bike are a little bit of a bonus because in dry conditions you just have full power, minimum traction control, but in the wet it's nice to be able to dial everything down power wise and be able to add a little bit more traction control in, so that gives a little bit more kind of flexibility to the engine. The MT-07 as well, I think, has got a little bit more kind of aggression to it with the way it looks. Obviously looks are quite a subjective thing. And then when it comes to the Trident, well, again, the looks of Trident is a little bit more kind of boutique-y. It's a little bit more styled. The chassis is a lot better. It hasn't got as much power as the Hornet, but that's got 80 bhp. It's more than enough to be going on with. So I think the Triumph's kind of a more well-rounded motorcycle. Then you've got the Kawasaki Z650, which is the same kind of thing, but with 67 bhp. That's quite a lot down on power compared to the Hornet. And then there's kind of a couple of unknowns. There's the new Suzuki GSX 8S that's coming out next year, which is going to rival the Hornet. That is a little bit down on power and a little bit heavier, but it'd be interesting to see what that's like. And KTM have, well, in the UK at least, of bringing back the Duke 790. They discontinued that, didn't they, to make way for the 890, but that's coming back in as well, and that's kind of similar in performance. I don't know how much it's going to cost yet, but that's going to be a little bit more sporty engine wise, a little bit sharper, a little bit more aggressive. So Honda are going to sell a ton of these bikes, costing $6,999. It's a lot of bike for the money. I could sit here and criticize parts of it. Whether that actually matters to the kind of person that's going to buy this bike, I don't really think it does. But there are kind of dynamically better bikes out there. But as it is, the Honda is a good, honest, middleweight naked in the same spirit as the old bike. And I think overall I would give it, if you took price out of the equation, I'd probably give it 7 out of 10. But when you add in the price, I'd jack it up to 8 out of 10. Honda have got 3 middleweight nakeds in their range. They've got the CB500 and the CB650, and this. The 500 is obviously more geared towards newer riders. The CB650 maybe for older riders who want an inline 4, and this kind of sits in the middle ground. It's a little bit perkier, it's a little bit more fun, and it's going to sell very, very well, and deservedly so.